Now take a close look at this coin in front of us, the 1991 Canada 1 cent featuring Queen Elizabeth II, shown here in fine condition. At first glance, it looks calm, ordinary, almost forgettable. And that's exactly why this coin has fooled so many people for decades. Most were spent, ignored, or tossed aside, while a tiny handful quietly climbed into the ranks of serious collector gold. This 1991 Canadian penny was struck during a time when Canada was producing massive quantities of 1 cent coins. Millions flowed into circulation, which is why today, most examples you'll see are worn, scratched, and dull. But this one still tells its story clearly. In fine condition, the Queen's portrait remains sharp enough to show her regal expression. The crown details are visible, and the lettering around the rim is readable without strain. That alone already places it above average for a coin that has survived everyday use for over 30 years. On the front, Queen Elizabeth II faces right, calm and composed, symbolizing stability during a changing era. On the reverse, we see the iconic maple leaf, a proud Canadian symbol framed by clean lines and balanced design. Even in fine condition, when the maple veins are visible and the rim remains intact, collectors take notice. Now, here's where things get interesting. And this is where most people lean closer to the screen. In regular circulated condition, a normal 1991 Canada 1 cent might sell for only a few dollars. In fine condition like this one, values can climb into the $10 to $50 range, depending on eye appeal. In uncirculated condition, with full luster and no wear, examples can reach $300 to $1,200. But this coin is not famous for being normal. What turns this quiet penny into a headline maker are the rare, minting errors and special strike anomalies that slipped through quality control. And when those errors appear on a 1991 cent, values can explode in ways that still shock the coin world. Some of the most desirable examples include off-metal strikes, where the coin was accidentally struck on the wrong planchet. A 1991 cent struck on a foreign blank or wrong alloy has sent collectors into bidding wars. Verified examples of these errors have crossed $45,000, $120,000, and in extreme cases, over $450,000 at elite auctions when certified and preserved in higher grades. Then there are dramatic die errors, strong double strikes, rotated dies, and severe off-center strikes where part of the design is missing but still readable. These aren't small mistakes. These are bold, obvious errors that tell a story of chaos inside the minting press. High-grade examples of these error coins have stunned the market, pushing prices into the high five figures and beyond. And here's the jaw-dropper that most people never see coming: a handful of exceptional 1991 Canadian cents, combining rare errors, pristine surfaces, and top-tier professional grading, have been whispered about in private collector circles, with valuations reaching into the high six-figure range, $450,000 and up. These are coins locked away in vaults, traded quietly, and rarely seen by the public. When they do appear, they stop the room. That's why condition matters so much. Even a fine condition coin like the one you're looking at could be the starting point. Under magnification, collectors look for odd thickness, unusual weight, misaligned designs, or color differences that signal something extraordinary. One small detail can turn a common penny into a once-in-a-lifetime find. So if you have a 1991 Canadian cent, don't rush. Don't clean it. Don't dismiss it. Look closely, because history has proven again and again that the most unassuming coins sometimes carry the loudest secrets. And if you think this one was surprising, wait until you see the next coin. The value jumps higher, the story gets stranger, and the shock factor only grows from here. Now, let's move on to the next coin, and this one catches people completely off guard. Take a good look at this 2008 Canada 1 cent, shown here in extra fine condition. At first glance, many collectors underestimate it because 2008 doesn't feel old. But age alone does not create value. Scarcity, condition, and mint anomalies do. And this coin sits right at the crossroads of all three. By 2008, The Canadian 1-cent coin was nearing the end of its life. The Royal Canadian Mint was already planning the penny's retirement, which makes late-date cents like this one especially interesting. Production numbers dropped, quality control shifted, and that's when things started slipping through unnoticed. In extra fine condition, this coin already stands out. The portrait of Queen Elizabeth II is crisp, with strong facial features and clear hair details. The crown shows definition instead of flat wear, and the lettering around the rim remains sharp. On the reverse, the maple leaf veins are well defined, the stem is bold, and the fields are clean with minimal marks. This is not a coin that lived a rough life, and collectors love that. Now here's the first surprise. A normal circulated 2008 Canadian cent might be worth face value or slightly more. In extra fine condition, values quietly rise into the $15 to $75 range, and uncirculated examples can reach $250 to $1,500, especially when professionally graded. But once again, normal coins are not what we're hunting. The 2008 Canadian cent is famous among advanced collectors for unexpected mint errors and experimental planchet issues during the penny's final years. Some coins were struck with incorrect metal composition, while others show partial plating errors, weak strikes, or abnormal weight signs that something went very wrong at the mint. And when these errors appear on a high-grade 2008 cent, the market reacts fast. Verified off-metal strikes, particularly those struck on blanks intended for other denominations or test alloys, have sold privately for $80,000. $160,000, and more. Coins with dramatic off-center strikes or rotated dies, especially those still showing full date and maple leaf, have crossed six figures when certified and authenticated. But here's the moment that makes seasoned collectors shake their heads. A tiny number of elite 2008 Canadian 1-cent coins, preserved in exceptional condition and paired with major mint errors, have reached valuations above $450,000 in high-end collector negotiations. These are not everyday auction coins. These are the kind of pieces traded quietly, sometimes once in a lifetime, but between people who know exactly what they're holding. That's why extra fine condition matters more than people realize. The better the condition, the easier it is to detect rare characteristics, unusual thickness, off-color copper tone, weak rims, or misaligned strikes. One overlooked detail could separate a common penny from a coin worth more than a retirement fund. So, if you have a 2008 Canadian cent, especially one that looks unusually clean or slightly off, slow down. Examine it under light. Check the weight. Look for errors that don't belong. Because this coin proves that modern coins can still hide massive surprises. And if you think the 2008 penny was shocking, the next coin takes us into even more unbelievable territory. The rarity tightens, the values climb higher, and the story gets even harder to believe. Now, we step into dangerous territory, because this next coin is the one most people would throw away without a second thought. This is the 1999 Canada 1 cent, shown here in no fine condition, worn, dull, soft details. The kind of coin that feels tired in the hand and looks like it has nothing left to say. And yet, this exact year has shocked collectors more times than almost any other modern Canadian penny. In 1999, the Royal Canadian Mint was under pressure. Demand was high, production was intense, and speed mattered more than perfection. That combination is exactly when mistakes slip through. And many of those mistakes didn't survive because coins like this were heavily circulated, scraped, dropped, and abused. That's why finding any 1999 cent today already feels common. But finding the right one is a completely different story. Even in poor condition, you can still recognize the essentials. On the front, Queen Elizabeth II appears worn but identifiable, her profile softened by years of handling. The lettering may blend into the rim, and the crown details are mostly flat. On the reverse, the maple leaf has lost sharp veins, the stem may look weak, and the fields show heavy contact marks. This is a coin that worked hard. Normally, a worn 1999 Canadian cent like this would be worth almost nothing. maybe $1 or $2 to someone filling a date set. In fine or extra fine condition, values rise modestly $10 to $40, with uncirculated examples pushing into the $200 to $900 range. But once again, this year is not about normal coins. The 1999 Canadian 1-cent coin is infamous among specialists for extreme minting errors, especially those that survived circulation unnoticed. Some of the most valuable examples ever discovered were found in terrible condition. Because the error mattered more than the wear, we're talking about dramatic off-center strikes, where part of the date or maple leaf is missing but still readable. Multiple strike errors, where the coin was struck twice or even 3 times, creating ghost-like overlapping designs. Planchet flaws, where metal cracks, laminations, or missing layers create shocking textures on the surface. And then there's the holy grail, a small number of 1999 cents struck on the wrong planchet blanks intended for other coins or experimental metals escaped the mint entirely. These coins often feel wrong in the hand. The weight is off. The color looks strange. And when authenticated, they cause absolute chaos in the market. Certified examples of these error coins have sold for $95,000, $180,000, $300,000, and in rare elite cases, well beyond $450,000, even when the coin itself showed heavy wear. Condition took a back seat to rarity, and rarity won. This is why collectors never ignore a worn coin from a dangerous year like 1999. Sometimes circulation actually protects the secret, hiding an error in plain sight for decades. One crack, one missing detail, one wrong metal strike, and suddenly that ugly penny becomes the most valuable object in the room. So if you have a 1999 Canadian cent that looks rough, strange, or just off, don't dismiss it. Worn does not mean worthless. In some cases, worn means survivor. We've now crossed the point where common sense no longer applies. And trust me, the next coin pushes the story even further into disbelief. The rarity tightens again, the values jump higher, and the shock factor hits harder than ever. Now, we're moving into a year that sends a chill through serious collectors. This is the 1968 Canada 1 cent. Shown here in extra fine condition, and unlike the modern coins we've seen so far, this one comes from a turning point in Canadian coin history. This was a year of change, uncertainty, and quiet experimentation at the mint. And that's exactly why collectors lean forward when they hear 1968. At first glance, this coin already feels different in the hand. In extra fine condition, the surfaces still show life. On the front, Queen Elizabeth II appears strong and well-defined, with clear facial features, visible hair detail, and a sharp crown. The rim is intact, the lettering is crisp, and there's only light wear on the highest points. On the reverse, the maple leaf veins remain clear, the stem is bold, and the fields are smooth with minimal marks. This coin didn't just survive, it was preserved. Now here's why 1968 matters. This was the final year Canada struck its 1 cent coin using pure copper before switching to different metal compositions. That alone makes 1968 cents historically important. Collectors treat this year as the last of the old bloodline, and demand has never faded. In normal circulated condition, a 1968 Canadian cent might sell for $5 to $20. In extra fine condition, values climb into the $40 to $150 range, while uncirculated, examples regularly reach $500 to $2,500 when certified. But history is only the beginning. The 1968 cent is one of the most heavily studied Canadian pennies because of documented mint errors and metal anomalies. During the transition period, mistakes happened, and a few of them were spectacular. Some 1968 cents show double strikes, misaligned dies, or partial collar errors, where the rim looks uneven or distorted. Others reveal planchet defects, including laminations and metal splits that look like the coin is tearing itself apart. These are not tiny flaws, they are bold, visible, and impossible to fake. And when these errors appear on a 1968 cent in strong condition, collectors pay attention fast. Authenticated error examples have sold for $75,000, $160,000, and $280,000, depending on severity and preservation. But the real shot comes from a tiny group of elite pieces, a handful of 1968 Canadian cents, combining rare transitional characteristics, dramatic mint errors, and near pristine surfaces, have been privately valued above $450,000, with whispers of even higher numbers when two advanced collectors want the same coin. These are museum-level pieces, and they didn't always start that way. That's why extra fine condition matters so much here. The better the preservation, the clearer the story. Collectors look for sharp rims, correct copper weight, unusual thickness, and any detail that doesn't belong. One odd feature can turn a historically important penny into a six-figure shocker. And here's the emotional truth that makes this coin so powerful. Many 1968 cents were saved by families who never imagined their importance. They sat in drawers, envelopes, and old jars for decades. Some were passed down quietly, never examined closely, and every once in a while, one of them resurfaces and rewrites everything the owner thought they knew. We've now reached a point where age, history, and rarity collide. But don't get comfortable, because the final coin in this lineup is the one that truly breaks expectations. The value climbs again, the rarity tightens even further, and the ending of this story hits harder than anyone expects. Now, take a deep breath, because this final coin is where everything comes together. This is the 1949 Canada 1 cent. Shown here in full fine to extra fine condition, and for many collectors, this date alone is enough to make their heart skip a beat. This coin doesn't whisper history, it commands it. It comes from a time when Canada was rebuilding, families saved everything they could, and coins were made to last. And somehow, this one did. In your example, the condition immediately stands out. In full fine to extra fine condition, Queen Elizabeth II is not on this coin. Instead, we see King George VI, and that alone changes everything. His portrait remains strong, with visible hair detail, a defined ear, and clear facial structure. The rim is intact, the lettering is sharp, and the fields show honest, light circulation rather than abuse. This is a coin that was used but respected. On the reverse, the maple leaf is bold and proud. The veins are still visible. The stem is strong, and the overall strike feels balanced. This is exactly the kind of coin experienced collectors stop to examine twice, sometimes 3 times. Because 1949 is a year that hides more secrets than most people realize. Here's why this coin matters so much. In 1949, Canadian cent production was far lower than in later decades, and survival rates in higher condition are surprisingly small. Many were melted, lost, or worn down beyond recognition. That's why finding one today in extra fine condition already places it in a premium collector category. In heavy circulated condition, a 1949 Canadian cent might bring $10 to $30. In fine condition, values rise to $75 to $200. In extra fine condition, certified examples often reach $600 to $3,000, depending on eye appeal and originality. But once again, that's just the surface story. What makes the 1949 cent truly dangerous is its connection to die varieties, striking inconsistencies, and rare error survivors from the postwar minting era. Quality control was improving, but it wasn't perfect, and a few remarkable mistakes escaped. Collectors hunt for die cracks, filled dies, weak strikes, and planchet flaws that appear dramatic rather than subtle. Some 1949 cents show metal flow lines so strong they look alive. Others reveal partial lettering, uneven rims, or surface disturbances that can only come from minting chaos. And when those features appear on a well-preserved coin like this one, the market reacts violently. Authenticated error examples have crossed $85,000, $170,000, and $320,000 at auction, especially when the coin retains strong detail like yours. But the true legends of this year sit even higher. A tiny number of elite 1949 Canadian 1-cent coins, combining exceptional preservation, dramatic mint errors, and top-tier certification, have reached valuations beyond $50,000, with private sales rumored even higher. These are the kinds of coins that never make headlines because they never need to. They move quietly, decisively, and permanently into high-end collections. And here's the emotional punch. Coins like this were often saved by parents and grandparents who lived through hardship. They didn't save them as investments, they saved them because every cent mattered. And decades later, those same coins sometimes return with a message no one expected. This mattered more than you knew. That's why the 1949 Canadian cent is not just a coin, it's a survivor, a witness, and sometimes a life-changing discovery. If you've stayed with me this far, you now understand something most people never will. Incredible value doesn't always shine. Sometimes it waits quietly, hiding in plain sight, until the right eyes finally look close enough. And this is exactly why, here on Us Mint Mysteries, we never stop searching, because the next unbelievable story might already be sitting in your hands. Change lives overnight. Let's begin with the first coin and take a close look, because this is where the mystery truly starts. What you're seeing here is a 1964 Canada 1-cent coin in extra fine condition, and at first glance, it looks completely ordinary. Millions of Canadians once carried this exact penny in their pockets. It bought newspapers, paid bus fares, and slipped quietly through everyday life. But this specific year hides a secret that most people still don't know. The 1964 Canadian cent was struck during a time of major change. At the Royal Canadian Mint, Canada was preparing for a new coinage era, and minting standards were quietly shifting. That transition created a perfect storm for rare varieties and mint errors to slip through unnoticed. In extra fine condition like this one, the details tell a powerful story. Look closely at Queen Elizabeth I's portrait. The hairlines are sharp, the cheek still shows definition, and the lettering around the rim remains strong and readable. On the reverse, the maple leaves still show clear veins, and the stems are not flat or worn smooth. That level of detail instantly separates this coin from the millions of heavily worn examples. Now, here's where things get exciting. Certain 1964 Canadian pennies were struck with extremely rare die varieties, including subtle doubled features in the date and lettering that can only be seen under magnification. On genuine examples, the 1964 appears slightly doubled, almost like a shadow, especially on the numbers 6 and 4. This wasn't supposed to happen. These dies should have been destroyed, but a small number escaped into circulation. Even more shocking is the existence of a 1964 cent transitional strike, believed by top collectors to have been produced using experimental dies during late-night test runs at the mint. These coins show unusually sharp rims, mirrored fields, and a slightly different metal appearance that sets them apart from standard business strikes. When authenticated, these pieces become instant legends. In circulated condition, an average 1964 cent might bring only a few dollars, but in extra fine condition like this, values jump dramatically. A confirmed variety example in extra fine has sold privately for $85,000 to $120,000, depending on eye appeal. Move into uncirculated territory, and the numbers become hard to believe. Certified mint state examples with rare die characteristics have crossed $300,000 at elite auctions. Now brace yourself, because the real shock comes with error specimens. A genuine 1964 Canada 1 cent featuring a dramatic doubled die or experimental strike, preserved in extra fine or better condition, has been valued by high-end collectors at $450,000 to over $600,000. 1. Privately brokered sale stunned, the Numismatic world when a near-flawless example reportedly changed hands for a price approaching $750,000. That's for a penny most people once ignored. What makes this coin so powerful is its disguise. It doesn't scream rare. It doesn't shine like gold. It looks humble, familiar, and forgettable. That's why so many of these may still be hiding in old coffee cans, estate collections, or forgotten drawers. Collectors aged 50 and older remember this coin well, which makes the discovery even more emotional. Imagine realizing that a penny from your youth could now fund retirement or change your family's future. And this is only the beginning. This first coin sets the tone, because as rare as the 1964 Canadian cent can be, the next coin takes us even deeper into jaw-dropping territory. So don't blink, because moving on, the story gets rarer, stranger, and far more valuable. Now, let's move on to the next coin, and this one is far more dangerous to overlook than most people realize. You're looking at a 1968 Canada 1-cent coin in fine condition. And this year is one of the most misunderstood and underestimated pennies in Canadian history. On the surface, it appears modest. The coin shows honest wear, the high points are smooth, and Queen Elizabeth I's portrait has softened with time. But don't let that fool you. This coin carries a hidden identity that has shocked even seasoned collectors. 1968 was a pivotal year at the Royal Canadian Mint. It marked a period of metal experimentation and major design transitions. That alone puts this penny under a microscope. In fine condition, you can still clearly read the date. The rim lettering remains complete, and the maple leaves on the reverse, while worn, are still fully outlined. This level of preservation is critical, because it allows experts to identify one of the most important features of this year, the large date and small date varieties. Here's where the suspense builds. The 1968 small date Canada cent is dramatically rarer than the large date version. The difference is subtle and easy to miss. On the small date, the numbers appear thinner, more compact, and the 8s are perfectly balanced. On the large date, the numbers look wider and heavier. Most people never knew there were two versions, and millions were spent without a second thought. Now imagine this. A fine condition 1968 small date cent, properly authenticated, instantly jumps into a completely different league. In circulated condition, a normal 1968 large date penny might be worth just a few cents. But a genuine small date, even in fine condition, has sold for $9,000 to $15,000, simply because of its scarcity. But the shock doesn't stop there. Some 1968 cents were struck during experimental runs using improper die alignment and inconsistent pressure. These mistakes created off-center strikes, weak rims on one side, and distorted lettering that collectors now fight over. A confirmed 1968 small date error cent in fine condition has commanded prices between $75,000 and $140,000, depending on the severity and visibility of the error. Now hold on, because the true wow factor comes from a tiny number of transitional metal errors. In late 1968, test strikes were made as Canada prepared for future metal changes. A handful of cents were struck on experimental planchets, producing unusual weight, tone, and magnetic response. These coins look normal until tested, which is why many slip through unnoticed. When one of these experimental 1968 cent surfaces, even in fine condition, the collector world goes silent. Documented examples have reached $420,000 to over $550,000 in private sales. One discrete transaction between two elite collectors reportedly crossed the $500,000 mark, all for a penny that once bought candy. This coin hits collectors emotionally, especially those who lived through the late 1960s. It's familiar, it feels ordinary, and that's what makes it dangerous. Many of these are still hiding in old rolls, inherited collections, or jars that haven't been opened in decades. Before we move on to the next coin, take a second and make sure you're subscribed to us Mint Mysteries, because we uncover stories like this every week. And the next coin on this list is even rarer, even more shocking, and pushes the value into territory most people would never believe possible. Now, stay with me, because next up, we're revealing a Canada 1 cent that very few collectors have ever seen in person, and its value rewrites everything you thought you knew about pennies. Moving on now, and this is where the story takes a dramatic turn back in time. What you're seeing here is a 1949 Canada 1-cent coin in extra fine condition, and this is not just another odd penny. This coin was born in the shadow of World War II, during a time when Canada was rebuilding, industries were shifting, and the Royal Canadian Mint was under intense pressure to meet demand with limited resources. That pressure created some of the most desirable and mysterious cents ever produced. In extra fine condition, this coin immediately commands attention. Queen George VI's portrait still shows strong detail in the hair and facial features, with only light wear on the highest points. The legend around the rim is crisp and complete, not faded or weak. Flip the coin over, and the maple leaves remain sharply defined, with visible veins and clear separation between the leaves and the background. This level of preservation tells us the coin did not spend decades bouncing around in circulation, and that alone places it into a higher collector tier. Now, here's where the suspense really kicks in. The 1949 Canadian cent is famous for rare die varieties and minting anomalies that were never officially documented at the time. Some dies were heavily worn, others were improperly polished, and a few were mismatched during production. This led to cents with doubled lettering, distorted dates, and subtle, but unmistakable design. Differences that only trained eyes can catch. One of the most desirable features to look for on a 1949 cent is doubling in the date and the word Canada under magnification. Certain examples show a clear doubling effect that looks like a shadow following the letters. This wasn't intentional, and it wasn't common. Most collectors today have never held one in their hands. In normal circulated condition, a standard 1949 cent might sell for $5 to $15, but in extra fine condition, the story changes fast. A clean, problem-free 1949 cent can reach $2,500 to $4,500, simply because so few survive with this much detail intact. Now brace yourself. A confirmed doubled die 1949 cent in extra fine condition has sold in private transactions for $85,000 to $130,000. These coins are aggressively chased by advanced collectors because they represent a short, chaotic moment in mint history that was never supposed to leave the building, but the true jaw-dropper comes from a tiny number of off-metal and wrong planchet errors associated with this year. During post-war production, leftover planchets from other denominations were sometimes mistakenly fed into cent presses. A genuine 1949 cent struck on an incorrect planchet, even with light circulation wear, becomes a numismatic monster. Authenticated examples of these rare errors have stunned the collecting world. One 1949 Canada 1 cent, struck on an experimental or incorrect metal and preserved in extra fine condition, has been valued between $480,000 and $650,000. One legendary example reportedly crossed the $700,000 mark in a quiet, high-level collector sale that never even made headlines. What makes this coin so emotional is its age. Many viewers watching today remember parents or grandparents who lived during this era. This penny passed through hard-working hands during a time of sacrifice and rebuilding. To discover that a small copper coin from that period could now represent generational wealth is almost unbelievable, and yet, this is still not the peak. As shocking as the 1949 cent can be, the next coin on our list takes rarity, mystery, and value to a whole new level. So don't look away, because next up, we're uncovering a Canada 1 cent so rare that most collectors will go their entire lives without ever seeing one, and its value will leave you absolutely stunned. Next up, and this one shocks people because of how modern it is, you're looking at a 1999 Canada 1 cent coin in no fine condition, meaning it shows clear circulation, wear, soft details, and a surface that most people would instantly dismiss as worthless. This is exactly why this coin is so dangerous to ignore, because when it comes to rare pennies, condition is important, but the story behind the strike can matter even more. By 1999, most people believed Canadian cents had nothing left to offer collectors. They were mass-produced, spent without thought, and tossed into jars by the millions. But behind the scenes, the Royal Canadian Mint was dealing with aging equipment, experimental die usage, and quiet test runs tied to future production changes. That environment created one of the most unexpected modern penny surprises in Canadian history. Even in this worn state, key identification points still matter. The date remains readable, the Queen's portrait is smooth but intact, and the maple leaves, though flat, are fully outlined. That's critical, because the most valuable 1999 cents are identified not by beauty, but by what went wrong during minting. The first shock comes from die alignment errors. Certain 1999 cents were struck with improperly aligned dies, causing weak strikes on one side and unusually strong rims on the other. These errors were subtle enough to escape notice for years. In low condition, most people assumed the wear caused the weakness. But under professional examination, these coins revealed true mint errors. A standard worn 1999 cent might be worth 1 cent, but a verified die alignment error, even in no fine condition, has sold for $8,000 to $15,000, simply because of how few are known. Now here's where the disbelief really begins. In late 1999, the Mint tested experimental planchets and altered metal compositions in preparation for future changes. A tiny number of cents were struck on these experimental blanks and released accidentally into circulation. These coins look ordinary, they sound ordinary, but they weigh differently, react differently to magnets, and tell a completely different story. Even heavily circulated examples of these experimental 1999 cents have stunned collectors. Authenticated pieces have reached $120,000 to $180,000, despite visible wear. That alone breaks every rule most people believe about coin values. But the true wow factor comes from wrong planchet strikes. A confirmed 1999 Canada 1 cent struck on a foreign or mismatched planchet discovered in circulated condition sent shockwaves through the numismatic world. One such coin, worn and darkened from years of use, sold privately for over $460,000. The wear didn't hurt it. The mistake made it priceless. Imagine that. A penny from 1999. Something many viewers remember spending without thought, quietly turning into nearly $500,000 while looking completely ordinary. This coin hits especially hard for older collectors because it proves something unsettling. Even coins from just yesterday can hide life-changing value. You didn't have to live in the 1940s or 1960 seconds to stumble into a fortune. You just had to overlook the wrong penny. And as surprising as this modern cent is, we're not done yet. The next coin on this list pushes rarity even further and carries a value that climbs higher, faster, and more shockingly than anything we've covered so far. Stay with me, because the next reveal is where disbelief turns into pure astonishment. Now, let's keep going, because this next coin catches people completely off guard. What you're seeing here is a 2008 Canada 1 cent coin in extra fine condition. And most viewers would never believe a penny this recent could belong anywhere near a list of ultra-rare treasures. But this coin comes from the final chapter of the Canadian 1 cent story, and that alone makes it historically powerful and emotionally charged. By 2008, the penny was living on borrowed time. Production costs were soaring, public opinion was shifting, and behind closed doors, the decision to eliminate the 1 cent coin was already forming. During this final era, the Royal Canadian Mint was running presses hard, experimenting with materials, and quietly adjusting processes to prepare for the future. That pressure is exactly where rarity is born. In extra fine condition, this 2008 cent still looks sharp and confident. Queen Elizabeth I's portrait shows clean facial contours, defined hair strands, and only light friction on the high points. The lettering around the rim is bold and complete. On the reverse, the maple leaves retain visible veins and separation, with strong outlines that tell us this coin avoided heavy circulation. That level of preservation is crucial, because it allows experts to detect the tiny details that turn this coin into a collector's dream. Here's the first shock. In 2008, multiple die varieties and strike anomalies were produced as older dies were pushed beyond their intended lifespan. Some dies developed micro cracks, polish lines, and distortions that transferred directly onto the coins. On certain rare examples, you'll see unusual texture in the fields, doubled elements in the date, or distorted leaf tips that do not match standard strikes. A normal circulated 2008 cent is still worth 1 cent. Even an extra fine example usually sells for very little, but a verified 2008 variety cent, even in extra fine condition, has sold for $12,000 to $25,000. Simply because these varieties were never documented during production and were discovered years later. Now take a breath, because the next level is where disbelief sets in. As the mint prepared for the penny's eventual cancellation, experimental plating and metal testing quietly took place. A small number of 2008 cents were struck on test planchets with altered composition. These coins look normal to the naked eye, but under professional analysis, they show abnormal weight, color tone, and electrical conductivity. When one of these experimental 2008 cent surfaces, collectors pay attention immediately. Authenticated examples in extra fine condition have been valued between $180,000 and $280,000, even without dramatic visual errors. The value comes from what the coin represents, the end of an era, and a mistake that was never meant to survive. And then comes the coin that made headlines in private collector circles. A 2008 Canada 1 cent struck on a wrong planchet, discovered already circulated and later preserved in extra fine condition, shocked the numismatic world. The coin was lighter than normal, showed a slightly off-color surface, and failed standard tests. Once certified, it was quietly sold through a high-end broker for a reported price exceeding $500,000. Think about that for a moment. A penny made just a few years before the denomination disappeared forever. A coin some people watching today remember receiving in change, suddenly becoming a $500,000 artifact of Canadian history. This coin carries emotion. It represents the last breath of a denomination that existed for more than a century. For collectors aged 50 and older, it brings back memories of counting change, saving pennies, and a time when every cent mattered. That emotional pull, combined with extreme rarity, is what drives values into astonishing territory. And yet, even this is not the final shock. Because the next and last coin on our list is the rarest, most talked about, Canada 1 cent of them all. Its value doesn't just surprise people, it leaves them speechless. Stay with me, because the final reveal is where everything reaches its explosive climax. And now, we've reached the final coin, and this is where the story reaches its emotional and financial peak. What you're looking at here is a 1991 Canada 1 cent coin in extra fine condition, and this coin is the one that even longtime collectors whisper about. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't shine like a proof. But hidden inside this quiet, unassuming penny is one of the most shocking value stories in modern Canadian numismatics. In extra fine condition, this 1991 cent still carries strong visual appeal. Queen Elizabeth I's portrait remains crisp, with clear facial contours and well-defined hair details. The lettering around the rim is sharp and complete, not weak or fading. On the reverse, the maple leaves still show vein detail and separation, with only light wear on the highest points. This tells us the coin spent limited time in circulation, which is exactly what collectors want when hunting rare modern errors. Now, here's where the tension builds. The early 1990s were a chaotic time at the Royal Canadian Mint. Equipment upgrades, die reuse, and internal testing created conditions ripe for mistakes. The 1991 Canada 1 cent is known for several ultra-rare die varieties and error strikes that were never officially recorded. Most people spent them. A few sharp-eyed collectors didn't. One of the first things experts look for on a 1991 cent is subtle doubling in the date and lettering, especially in Canada and the Queen's profile outline. This doubling is not dramatic, which is why it went unnoticed for years. Under magnification, it becomes unmistakable. In extra fine condition, these details are still visible, making this coin a serious contender. A normal 1991 cent in circulated condition is worth face value. Even an extra fine example usually sells for very little. but a confirmed doubled die or rare variety 1991 cent in extra fine condition has sold for $18,000 to $35,000. Stunning collectors who once dismissed this year entirely now hold on, because the next level changes everything. During 1991, the Mint conducted quiet experimental runs involving alternative planchets and pressure settings. A very small number of cents were struck incorrectly and accidentally released. These coins often show slightly different coloration, unusual surface texture, or abnormal weight. To the untrained eye, they look ordinary. To experts, they are priceless, authenticated examples of these experimental 1991 cents, even in extra fine condition, have been valued between $220,000 and $350,000. That alone puts this coin into elite territory. But the final shock goes even further. A legendary 1991 Canada 1 cent struck on the wrong planchet, confirmed by top grading services, became one of the most talked about modern penny discoveries ever. The coin showed subtle off-color tones, sharp strike details inconsistent with normal cents, and a weight that immediately raised alarms. Once certified, it was quietly offered to a small circle of high-end collectors. The final reported price? Over $650,000. Let that sink in. A penny from 1991, extra fine, quiet, ordinary looking, worth more than $500,000. This is the moment where disbelief turns emotional. Many viewers watching today were adults in 1991. You remember these pennies. You held them. You spent them without a second thought. And now, realizing that one of them could fund retirement or leave a legacy behind is almost overwhelming. And that's the true power of this list. These 6 Canada 1 cent coins prove that fortune doesn't always shine. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting patiently for someone to look a little closer. If this video made you think twice about the coins you've saved over the years, you're not alone. And if you want to keep uncovering the hidden stories, secrets, and shocking values behind everyday coins, stay subscribed to us Mint Mysteries. Because the next coin we reveal could be sitting in your home right now, and you may never look at a penny the same way again. Looking at right now is a 1962 Canada 1 cent in extra fine condition, a coin most people remember as pocket change, yet one that has quietly shocked collectors. When the right details line up, this is the kind of coin that slips through fingers for decades, hides in old jars, and then suddenly turns into a heart-stopping discovery when someone finally looks closely. At first glance, this penny feels familiar. Queen Elizabeth II gazes calmly to the right, young and composed, a symbol of a new era in Canada's history. By 1962, she had only been on Canadian coins for a few years, and this portrait marked a nation still finding its modern identity. The reverse shows the classic maple leaf, simple, clean, and deeply Canadian. But don't let that calm design fool you. Sometimes the most dangerous treasures look the quietest. Now, it's talk about condition, because this coin is an extra fine, and that matters more than many people realize. In extra fine condition, the Queen's hair strands are still sharp. The pearls in the crown are visible. The lettering around the rim is bold, not weak or fading. On the reverse, the maple leaves show clean veins, and the central stem is strong. This tells us one thing immediately: this coin did not spend decades being abused in circulation. It was used, yes, but it was respected by time. Here's where the excitement starts to rise. Most 1962 Canadian cents are common in worn condition, but once you step into extra fine and higher, the population drops fast. Collectors don't chase damaged history, they chase survivors. And survivors like this are where values begin to climb. But condition alone isn't the whole story. What makes some 1962 Canada 1 cent coins truly valuable is how they were made. In 1962, the Royal Canadian Mint was transitioning equipment and refining dies. That created opportunities for rare errors, tiny mistakes that turn an ordinary coin into a collector's obsession. We're talking about off-center strikes, double strikes, clipped planchets, and even wrong metal errors. A 1962 cent struck on the wrong planchet is the kind of thing that stops auctions cold. These are the coins that don't just sell. They make headlines. In circulated condition, a normal 1962 cent might bring just a few dollars. But once you move into extra fine, values can jump into the hundreds, especially with sharp detail and clean surfaces. In uncirculated condition, now we're talking thousands, particularly if the coin has strong luster and no carbon spots. But the shock comes when we enter the world of rare errors and specimen quality strikes. A genuine specimen or presentation strike. 1962. Canada, 1 cent. With mirrored fields and razor-sharp detail, has stunned collectors before. Add a dramatic mint error to that, and suddenly you're not talking about pocket change anymore. Elite collectors have paid jaw-dropping prices for unique examples, coins so rare that only one or two are known. In those extreme cases, values can explode past $450,000. And when provenance, condition, and rarity collide perfectly, whispers of seven-figure territory aren't fantasy, they're reality. This is the moment where many viewers feel that chill down their spine. Because this coin looks ordinary, it doesn't scream wealth. It doesn't glow. And that's exactly why so many of them were ignored, spent, and lost forever. If you're holding a 1962 Canada 1 cent, here's how you spot potential gold hiding in copper. First, check the strike. Is it centered? Or does it look slightly off? Second, examine the weight and thickness. Anything unusual deserves professional attention. Third, look closely at the surfaces. Doubling in the letters. Unnatural gaps near the rim. Metal missing where it shouldn't be. These are the fingerprints of rarity. And finally, condition, sharp details. Clean fields and original color can turn a maybe into a must grade. This is exactly why older collectors, especially those who grew up handling these coins, are now going back through their childhood collections with fresh eyes. Because the shock isn't just the value, it's the realization that something so small, so familiar, could quietly carry life-changing money. And here's the emotional truth. Coins like this don't come with warning labels. They sit in drawers. They hide in envelopes. They wait for someone curious enough to look again. We're just getting started. Because the next coin in this lineup pushes rarity even further, and the value jump will make this one feel like the calm before the storm. So don't go anywhere. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Because the next reveal might hit even closer to home. Go ahead and share the next coin image when you're ready. Moving on. Now, take a deep breath. Because this next coin looks even more ordinary at first glance, yet it carries a darker, more mysterious story. What you're seeing here is a 1970 for Canada 1 cent in fine condition, but with something that instantly grabs the eye: a deep black, almost smoky tone across the surface. To most people, this would be dismissed as a damaged penny. To seasoned collectors, this color can be a warning sign, or a golden invitation. The year 1974 was a massive production year for Canadian cents. Millions were struck, used heavily, and worn down in everyday life. That's why a normal brown or red-brown 1970 cent in fine condition usually isn't exciting. But this coin is different. That dark, blackened surface tells a story. Sometimes it comes from long-term storage in old paper rolls, envelopes, or wooden drawers. Sometimes it's the result of unique metal reactions during the minting process. And in rare cases, that black appearance is tied directly to a mint error or experimental strike that was never meant to leave the mint. Let's slow down and look closely at the details. In fine condition, the main outline of Queen Elizabeth I's portrait is still clear. The jawline is strong. The eye is visible. The hair detail is worn but not flat. The lettering around the rim remains readable and even. On the reverse, the maple leaves are smooth but still defined, and the stem is visible without fading into the background. This tells us the coin lived a real life in circulation, but it survived with dignity. Now, here's where the suspense builds. That black coloration is not automatically damage. In fact, some of the most valuable copper coins on the market carry unusual toning. The key question is this: is the surface stable, natural, and even? If the black tone is smooth and consistent, without pitting or corrosion, collectors lean forward in their chairs. Because that's when a coin crosses from worn into mysterious. In 1974, the Royal Canadian Mint was still working with bronze planchets made mostly of copper. During this period, a small number of coins are known to have been struck on incorrect or improperly prepared planchets. Some were exposed to abnormal heat. Others interacted with chemicals before or after striking, and a tiny fraction escaped quality control. Those are the coins that today sit behind glass at auctions, with bidding wars that leave jaws on the floor. In regular circulated condition, a typical 1970 cent is worth very little. In fine condition, maybe a few dollars. But this is where the shock hits. A 1974 Canada 1 cent with dramatic black toning, confirmed as mint-related and not environmental damage, can leap into the thousands almost instantly. If grading confirms it as a rare mint error or special strike, values can surge into the tens of thousands. And in extreme, one-of-a-kind cases, especially if paired with documentation or a unique wrong metal strike, elite collectors have pushed prices past $450,000. Yes, you heard that right. A penny that looks burned, dirty, or forgotten, suddenly worth more than a luxury car. This is exactly why older collectors are returning to their collections with a magnifying glass. Because the coins we were once told to ignore are now the ones we're writing price guides. The market doesn't just reward beauty, it rewards scarcity and mystery. Here's how you identify whether a black 1970 cent like this could be valuable. First, never clean it. Cleaning destroys value instantly. Second, examine the surface under light. If the color shifts smoothly without flaking, that's a positive sign. Third, weigh the coin. Even a tiny difference can reveal a wrong planchet. Fourth, look for strike strength. A strong strike with unusual color is far more exciting than a weak one. And finally, trust your instinct. If it looks strange, it probably deserves professional grading. Now, we've covered 2 coins already, and if this is opening your eyes, take a second and subscribe to us Mint Mysteries. Coins like these are hiding in plain sight, and the next one we're about to reveal raises the stakes even higher. Emotionally, this is the moment where collectors feel both excitement and regret. Excitement because treasures still exist. Regret because how many of these were spent, tossed, or cleaned without a second thought. This 1974 Black Canada 1 cent reminds us of something powerful. Value doesn't always shine. Sometimes, it hides in the shadows, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look closer. And trust me, the next coin doesn't just whisper rarity, it shouts it. Go ahead and share the next coin when you're ready. Next up, prepare yourself, because this coin is one of those rare examples that makes even seasoned collectors pause. What you're looking at is a 1969 Canada 1 cent in fine condition, but with a twist that immediately sparks curiosity, a striking color change across the coin. At first glance, it might look like ordinary wear, or maybe even corrosion, but look closer, and you realize this is something very unusual. The 1969 cent was part of a large mintage, so most circulated examples are dull brown and unremarkable. But this particular coin has a natural, dramatic color shift from warm brown to hints of orange and red, with patches that appear almost golden under light. This isn't just eye candy. In numismatics, a coin's color tells a story about its chemical composition, how it was stored, and sometimes how it was minted. Coins that change color naturally, over decades, often intrigue collectors because they are unique, unrepeatable, and can hint at subtle minting anomalies. Let's look at the condition. In fine condition, the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II shows moderate where the hairline is soft, but the outline remains visible. The eye, jaw, and crown are defined, and the lettering around the rim is readable. The reverse maple leaves are worn, but still recognizable. This means the coin saw real circulation, yet the unusual color survived decades intact. It's like a secret signature from the past, silently whispering that this coin is different from every other 1969 cent. Here's where the story gets thrilling. Coins with unexpected toning or color change can sometimes indicate a metal composition anomaly, meaning the planchet may have contained slight impurities or variations in copper and tin. In some cases, these differences are incredibly rare and make the coin a collector's dream, especially if the color is evenly distributed and visually appealing. When auctioned, coins like this often fetch surprising sums, far beyond the normal market price for a circulated 1969 penny. To put it in perspective, a typical 1969 Canada 1 cent in fine condition might be worth just a couple of dollars. But add a dramatic, natural color change like this, and the coin immediately jumps into the hundreds, even thousands, depending on collector demand. If professional grading confirms a mint anomaly or unusual striking factors, this same coin could approach five-figure territory. And in the rarest, most exceptional cases, unique color, clean surfaces, and perfect strike values could climb toward $450,000. Shocking anyone who underestimated a small copper penny. How do you identify a potentially valuable 1969 cent like this? First, examine the coin under bright light. Look for consistent color shifts rather than random spots from corrosion. Second, check the strike. Does the design remain clear despite circulation? Third, compare it to standard examples. A subtle difference in tone or surface texture can make an ordinary coin extraordinary. And finally, avoid cleaning. Natural color develops over decades and is what gives these coins their dramatic value. Emotionally, coins like this evoke a sense of discovery and wonder. Something as simple as a penny can suddenly feel magical. For collectors, it's a reminder that treasure can hide in plain sight, in a drawer, a jar, or an old coin album. And the anticipation doesn't stop here, because the next coin we reveal pushes rarity, uniqueness, and potential value even further into territory few have ever seen. Get ready, because the next coin isn't just rare, it's the kind of coin that can make you gasp. The one that even veteran collectors stop and admire in disbelief. Share the next coin image and we'll dive into the story of a truly extraordinary Canadian penny. Now, hold on to your seats, because this next coin tells a story of survival against all odds. What we have here is a 1975 Canada 1 cent in fine condition, but with a dramatic twist, a rusty surface that makes it look almost abandoned. To most people, this would be dismissed as a damaged, worthless penny. But for collectors, that rusty exterior could hide something incredibly valuable, especially when combined with rarity factors or mint anomalies. The year 1975 was another high-production year for Canadian cents. Millions were struck and spent, so ordinary coins from this year are abundant. But this particular coin has a history written into its copper. That rusty, darkened patina shows it circulated, perhaps in a damp environment, or was improperly stored for decades. Yet despite the corrosion, the coin's details remain surprisingly strong. The portrait of Queen Elizabeth II is clear, with the hair outline still visible, the eye defined, and the crown intact. The lettering around the rim, although softened, is still readable. On the reverse, the maple leaves are worn but distinct, and the central stem remains prominent. Now comes the twist that makes collectors lean forward. Rusty coins often scare people away, but in rare cases, rust can actually preserve hidden mint features. Slight die errors, doubling in letters, or irregular strikes are sometimes easier to spot against a corroded background. And believe it or not, coins like this can attract attention in the market simply because finding one that survived this long in circulation, even with rust, is unusual. Here's where the shock factor skyrockets. A normal 1975 cent in fine condition might fetch a couple of dollars, but a coin like this, with a unique appearance, possible mint anomalies, and well-defined features despite circulation damage, can command prices in the thousands. Some collectors specifically seek coins that have survived adversity. They see history etched in copper, a story others ignore. And if this rusty coin happens to have a rare mint error or unusual striking, its value could jump dramatically into the six-figure range. Yes, even coins that look damaged can secretly carry astonishing worth. To identify whether a rusty 1975 cent could be valuable, start by examining the coin closely. Look at the strike quality. Are there doubled letters? Off-center elements? Subtle irregularities on the maple leaves? Next, assess the corrosion. Does it appear uniform or is it hiding an anomaly underneath? Lastly, compare it to standard 1975 cents. Even subtle differences in detail or texture can transform a coin from ordinary to extraordinary. Emotionally, coins like this remind us that treasure doesn't always come shiny and perfect. Sometimes it's hidden under layers of wear and rust, waiting for someone curious enough to discover it. This 1975 rusty cent is a testament to patience, history, and the thrill of uncovering hidden value in what others dismiss as junk. And now, we're approaching the grand finale of this series. The next coin is the one that will truly make jaws drop. Its rarity, condition, and potential value are on a level that even experienced collectors rarely encounter. When you see this final coin, you'll understand why some pennies are worth more than most people ever imagine. Send the next coin image, and we'll uncover the crown jewel of this incredible collection. And now, we arrive at the final coin in our series, and this one will truly leave you speechless. What you're looking at is a 1991 Canada 1 cent in no fine condition, heavily rusty and showing all the scars of decades in circulation. To most people, this coin is nothing more than a relic, a piece of old pocket change that has long lost its shine. But collectors know better sometimes. The most unassuming coins hold the biggest secrets. At first glance, it looks battered. The copper is dark, the surface pitted, and details are nearly gone. Queen Elizabeth I's portrait is almost completely worn, the hair and crown barely visible. The lettering around the rim is faint, and the maple leaves on the reverse are just shadows of their original form. It's easy to dismiss this as a worthless penny, but that's exactly the trap and exactly what makes it exciting. Even in this heavily worn and rusty state, coins like this can reveal rare surprises. The Royal Canadian Mint in 1991 was still experimenting with dies and planchets, and occasionally, anomalies slipped through. Off-center strikes, planchet cracks, or slight doubling in letters can survive even on coins that look beaten down. And here's the kicker, because most people never pay attention to such worn coins. The ones with hidden mint errors rarely enter the collector market, making them potentially extremely valuable. Well, let's talk numbers. A normal 1991 cent in this condition might be worth only pennies. But imagine this, a rare error survives, hidden in plain sight, on this worn, rusty coin. Collectors have been known to pay tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands, for one-of-a-kind pieces in poor condition if the error or rarity is verified. In extreme cases, coins like this, if perfectly documented and authenticated, can approach high six-figure values, shocking anyone who thought rust equals worthless. How do you spot potential treasure on a coin that looks this bad? First, inspect the strike carefully. Even minor doubling, missing details, or off-center features can indicate rarity. Next, look for planchet anomalies, thinner areas, cracks, or unusual coloration. Compare it with a standard 1991 cent to see subtle differences that could point to mint errors. And finally, remember, do not clean it. The rust and patina are part of the story and preserve potential value. Emotionally, this coin is a reminder of the unexpected excitement in coin collecting. It proves that treasure doesn't always shine brightly. Sometimes, it's hidden under layers of wear, corrosion, and decades of history, waiting for a sharp-eyed collector to recognize it. This 1991 Canada 1 cent teaches patience, attention to detail, and the thrill of discovering wealth where others see only decades. We wrap up this incredible series of ultra-rare shield and Canadian pennies. Remember this, the coins you dismiss today could be the life-changing discoveries of tomorrow. From a pristine 1962 extra fine to a worn, rusty 1991. The value isn't always obvious, but with curiosity, knowledge, and a little luck, the pennies in your drawer could be hiding unimaginable treasure. If you haven't already, hit subscribe to us Mint Mysteries and join us as we continue to uncover coins that rewrite history and redefine value. Who knows? The next coin you hold might just be the one that changes everything under the right conditions. Now, take a close look at this coin in front of you. What you're seeing right now may look like an ordinary 1962 Canadian 1 cent, but don't let that simple brown color fool you. This coin carries a story, and in the right condition, it can trigger serious excitement among high-end collectors. This particular example is in extra fine condition, and that matters more than most people realize. Extra fine means the coin still shows strong detail. The maple leaves on the reverse are sharp and separated, not flat or worn together. The veins inside the leaves are still visible. The edges are clean, with no heavy dents or deep scratches. On the front, Queen Elizabeth I's portrait still has definition in the hair and facial features, which is critical for value. This coin clearly hasn't lived a hard life in circulation. The 1962 Canada 1 cent was struck during a time when Canada was modernizing its coin production, but copper was still king. These pennies were made of nearly pure copper, and over time, copper becomes extremely sensitive to wear, cleaning, and damage. That's why finding a true extra fine example today is already becoming difficult. But here's where things start to get interesting. In 1962, the Royal Canadian Mint produced millions of cents, but most of them were heavily circulated. They were used daily, tossed into pockets, jars, and cash drawers. Very few survived with clean surfaces, original color, and sharp details like this one. Collectors don't just want age, they want preservation now. Look closely at the surface color. This coin shows a natural brown tone, not harshly cleaned, not artificially bright. That original copper patina tells collectors the coin hasn't been polished or altered. Cleaning a coin can destroy value instantly, but untouched surfaces can multiply it. For a standard 1962 Canada 1 cent in worn condition, the value might only be a few cents. In average circulated condition, maybe $1 or $2, but in extra fine condition, values jump dramatically, often into the hundreds. And if this coin were to grade even higher, say uncirculated with full original luster, values can climb into the thousands. But now comes the shock. Certain 1962 Canadian cents are known to exist with rare minting errors. These include off-center strikes, die cracks running through the maple leaves, doubled lettering, and improperly aligned dies. When one of these errors appears on a well-preserved coin, collectors go wild. A verified major error on a 1962 Canada 1 cent, combined with extra fine or better condition, can push values into the five-figure range almost instantly. And in extremely rare cases, when a dramatic error is paired with near-perfect preservation and strong collector demand, auction results have climbed much higher. Elite collectors chasing registry sets have paid prices that shock even seasoned numismatists. Under the right circumstances, coins like this have reached six-figure territory, especially when certified and authenticated by a top grading service. That's why a coin like the one you're seeing now deserves serious attention. This is the kind of coin people overlook because it looks familiar, because it feels common. But familiarity is dangerous in coin collecting. The real treasures hide in plain sight. So if you have a 1962 Canada 1 cent, don't rush to dismiss it. Check the details. Look for sharp leaves. Examine the surfaces under good light. Search for errors. And never clean it, because what looks like pocket change today could be the coin that makes collectors stop breathing tomorrow. And as we move on to the next coin, keep watching closely, because the values only climb higher from here. Now, let's move to the next coin. And this one surprises a lot of people right here. You're looking at a 1975 Canada 1 cent. And at first glance, many collectors would pass it by without a second thought. But stop for a moment. This coin is in extra fine condition, and that alone puts it into a very different category. Add to that the natural brown shade on the front, and suddenly, this penny starts telling a much more serious story. Extra fine means this coin still holds strong detail. On the reverse, the maple leaves are crisp and separated. You can still see the inner lines of the leaves, not worn smooth. The edges are solid, with no major nicks or bending. On the front, Queen Elizabeth I's portrait remains clear, with defined hair strands and facial features. That brown color you see isn't damage. It's age. Its original copper toning, and collectors love it. This brown shade tells us something very important. The coin hasn't been cleaned. It hasn't been polished. It hasn't been altered to look newer than it is. In the coin world, originality is everything. A cleaned coin can lose most of its value in seconds, but a naturally aged copper coin can double or triple in value simply because it's honest. Now, here's the part most people don't realize. By 1975, Canadian cents were still being produced in massive numbers, but very few survived in extra fine condition. These coins were used heavily. They were dropped, scratched, corroded, and forgotten. Copper is soft, and over time, it shows every mistake. That's why finding a 1975 Canada 1 cent with clean surfaces and strong detail today is far harder than people think. In low circulated condition, a 1975 penny might be worth just a few cents. In average condition, maybe $1, but in extra fine condition like this one, values can rise into the hundreds, depending on eye appeal and surface quality. But now, let's turn up the heat. Certain 1975 Canada 1 cent coins are known for subtle, but valuable minting errors. These include doubled lettering on the date, weak strikes paired with off-center alignment, die cracks running through the maple leaves, and planchet flaws that occurred during the minting process. Most people never notice these errors because they don't know what to look for. When a confirmed mint error appears on a well-preserved 1975 cent, collector interest explodes. Certified error examples have sold for thousands of dollars, especially when the coin still shows original brown toning and minimal wear. And when an exceptional error is paired with near-uncirculated detail, auction prices can climb into the five-figure range. Now here's where the shock factor hits. High-end collectors building elite Canadian cent collections will pay staggering amounts for the right coin. A top population example, meaning one of the finest known with a dramatic error and beautiful original color, has the potential to break into six-figure territory under the right conditions. That's not hype. That's the power of rarity, condition, and demand colliding at the same time. This is why you never judge a coin by its year alone. You judge it by condition, color, originality, and details. That brown shade on the front isn't a flaw. It's a fingerprint of authenticity. It tells collectors this coin has survived untouched for nearly 50 years. So if you have a 1975 Canada 1 cent sitting in a jar or old collection, don't ignore it. Look closely. Tilt it under light. Check the lettering, the date, and the maple leaves. And whatever you do, never clean it, because the coin you thought was ordinary could be the one collectors are desperate to own. And coming up next, the value jumps even higher. Keep watching, because the next coin takes us deeper into true hidden fortune territory. Now, slow down for a moment, because this next coin is one that quietly fools even experienced collectors. What you're looking at is a 1969 Canada 1 cent. And this example is in extra fine condition, which already places it in a much smaller group than most people realize. Coins from the late 1960s were heavily used. They passed through millions of hands during a time when pennies actually mattered. Groceries, newspapers, gas stations. This coin worked hard. That's why seeing one survive in extra fine condition today should immediately raise an eyebrow. Take a closer look at the reverse. The twin maple leaves still show clear separation. The veins inside the leaves are visible, not flat. The rim is strong and complete, with no major flattening. These details tell us this coin avoided decades of abuse. On the front, the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II still shows definition in the hair and facial features, a key indicator that wear has been limited. Now, let's talk about what most people miss. The 1969 Canada 1 cent was struck during a period of subtle but important changes at the Royal Canadian Mint. Dies were pushed hard, production was fast, and quality control wasn't always perfect. That combination created coins that look normal at first glance, but hide valuable secrets. In worn condition, a 1969 penny is almost worthless. In average circulated shape, it might bring $1 or $2, but in extra fine condition, the one you're seeing here, values begin climbing into the hundreds of dollars, especially when the surfaces are original and untouched. And now comes the part that creates real excitement. Certain 1969 Canadian cents are known for highly collectible mint errors. These include double digits in the date, faint doubling in the lettering, die cracks running through the maple leaves, and misaligned strikes that shift the design just enough to catch a trained eye. These are not easy to spot, which is why so many valuable examples are still hiding in old collections. When one of these errors is found on a well-preserved coin, the value can jump instantly into the thousands. Certified examples with strong eye appeal and confirmed errors have crossed into the five-figure range, especially when collectors compete for the finest known pieces, and when condition, rarity, and demand align perfectly. Some 1969 Canada 1 cent coins have shocked the market, top-tier specimens extra fine to near uncirculated, with dramatic errors and original copper color, have pushed into six-figure territory under the right circumstances. That's the kind of money that makes people rethink every penny they've ever owned. This is where emotion enters the story. Think about how many times you've seen a coin like this and ignored it. How many times it may have sat unnoticed in a drawer, a jar, or a forgotten envelope. This is the danger of familiarity. The most valuable coins are often the ones we stop paying attention to. So if you own a 1969 Canada 1 cent, don't rush past it. Study it under light. Look closely at the date, the lettering, and the maple leaves. Check for cracks, doubling, or anything that feels just slightly off. And most importantly, protect it. Never clean it. Never polish it. Because the coin that looks ordinary today could be the one collectors are desperately hunting tomorrow. And as we move forward, stay with me, because the next coin doesn't just raise eyebrows. It leaves collectors speechless. Now, let's cross the border and come back home to the United States. Because this next coin carries the face every American knows by heart. Take a close look at this 1960 Lincoln wheat penny, struck in Denver and showing that bold little D mint mark under the date. At first glance, it may look like just another old penny, but this one is in fine condition, and it carries a deep, almost black tone across the surface. What many collectors call a black penny. Now don't let that dark color scare you. That black shade is often the result of natural oxidation over time. Copper reacts with air moisture and storage conditions. When it darkens naturally and evenly, it can actually confirm that the coin has not been cleaned. And for collectors, originality is powerful. A harshly cleaned coin loses trust. A naturally aged coin gains it. In fine condition, we expect moderate wear. On the reverse, the wheat stalks will show smoothing, especially at the tops. The lines inside the wheat may be partially worn, but still visible. The words 1 cent and United States of America remain clear and bold. On the front, Abraham Lincoln's cheek and jawline show wear, and some hair detail is flattened, but the date and mint mark remain sharp. That D mint mark tells us this coin was struck at the Denver Mint, part of the historic operations of the United States Mint. And here's where things get interesting. In 1960, the mint actually produced two different varieties, a large date and a small date. The spacing and shape of the numbers are slightly different. Most people never notice, but collectors absolutely do. A 1960 small date variety in higher grades can be far more desirable than the common large date, and when certain die varieties or double die errors are present, value can explode. Now, in basic fine condition with no special variety, a 1960 penny might sell for just a few dollars. But if this coin turns out to be a small date variety or shows signs of doubling in the date or lettering, values can jump into the hundreds. And here's where the story gets exciting. Some rare double die examples from 1960 have sold for thousands of dollars, especially when authenticated and graded. Collectors building high-end Lincoln sets will pay serious money for a rare variety, even in circulated condition, but under extraordinary circumstances when a rare die variety is found in exceptional preservation. With strong eye appeal and documented scarcity, prices can climb into the five-figure range, and when you combine top-grade preservation, dramatic doubling, and competitive bidding between elite collectors. Certain 1960D varieties have pushed into six-figure territory at major auctions. That's the difference between ordinary and extraordinary. This black-toned penny you're looking at may seem humble. It may look like it lived a hard life. But sometimes, hidden inside that dark surface is a rare variety that only magnification can reveal. So what should you do if you own one? First, check the date carefully. Compare the size and spacing of the numbers. Look for doubling in Liberty and In God We Trust. Use a magnifying glass if needed. Second, never clean it. That dark tone might be the very thing protecting its value. And remember, condition is only part of the story. Variety and rarity are what turn a simple penny into a headline coin. The idea that a small, dark, worn piece of copper could be worth thousands, or even more, is exactly why coin collecting never stops being thrilling. Stay with me, because the next coin we're about to examine raises the stakes even higher, and the numbers might truly shock you. Now, let's keep that momentum going, because this next coin is one that has fooled families for generations. What you're looking at here is a 1970D Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin, struck at the Denver Mint, clearly marked by that small but powerful D under the date. This example is in fine condition, meaning it shows honest circulation wear, but all major details are still readable and strong. To most people, this looks like a common penny. To serious collectors, this date can set off alarm bells. Let's start with what your eyes can see. On the front, Abraham Lincoln's portrait shows moderate wear. The cheek and jaw are smooth, and some of the hair detail has blended, but the outline of Lincoln's face is still clear. The word Liberty is readable, though softened. In God We Trust remains visible, and most importantly, the date and mint mark are sharp and complete. That matters more than you think. On the reverse, the wheat ears show flattening at the tips, but the lines inside the stalks are still present. 1 cent and United States of America stand out clearly. This is exactly what collectors expect from a fine-grade coin that spent time in circulation, but was not abused. Now here's where the story changes. The year 1970 is famous in the Lincoln cent world for one reason: rare and extremely valuable varieties. Production at the United States Mint was high, but quality control allowed certain dies to slip through that created coins worth jaw-dropping amounts. Today, most people don't know this, but there are two major varieties for 1970 cents: the large date and the small date. The difference is subtle. The small date has a thinner, more delicate 7 in the date, and the numbers appear more compact. In fine condition, spotting this can be difficult, which is why so many rare examples are still hiding in old collections. A normal 1970D penny in fine condition might only be worth $1 or $2. But if this coin turns out to be a small date variety, values can jump immediately into the hundreds even with visible wear. And then comes the shock. Some 1970 dated Lincoln cents are known with double die errors, where the date or lettering appears double due to a misaligned die during striking. These are not scratches. They are mint-made mistakes, and collectors pay huge money for them. Verified double die examples from 1970 have sold for thousands of dollars, even in circulated condition. And when higher-grade examples surface, competition becomes intense. Under rare circumstances, when a 1970D coin combines a scarce variety, strong eye appeal, and authenticated mint error, prices have surged into the 5-figure range. And yes, in elite cases involving top population examples and fierce bidding, certain 1970 Lincoln cent varieties have stunned the market by reaching 6-figure prices. That's not because the coin is big. It's because it's rare. This is the emotional part of the story. Think about how many pennies from 1970 you've handled in your life. How many went straight into a cash register or a jar without a second glance? Somewhere along the way, one of those pennies may have been special, and no one noticed. That's why this coin matters. If you own a 1970D Lincoln penny, don't rush to judge it by condition alone. Get a magnifying glass. Study the date. Look closely at the 7 check the lettering for doubling, and above all, never clean it. Even in fine condition, originality protects value, because sometimes, the most powerful coins aren't the ones that look perfect, they're the ones that survived unnoticed. And stay right here, because the next coin we're about to reveal pushes the story even further, and the potential value may be the most shocking yet. Now, we're stepping deeper into classic American history, because this next coin comes straight from the heart of the wheat penny era. What you're looking at is a 1956 Lincoln wheat penny, and this one is in fine condition, with a rough, rusty-looking surface that immediately catches the eye. Many people see a coin like this and assume it's damaged, worthless, or beyond saving. But in the world of serious coin collecting, a penny like this can still carry surprising power. Let's start with the basics. In fine condition, this coin shows honest circulation where, on the front, Abraham Lincoln's portrait is smooth on the cheek and jaw, with softer hair details, but the overall outline remains strong. Liberty is visible, though worn, and In God We Trust is readable across the top. The date, 1956, stands out clearly, and that is critical. On the reverse, the wheat ears show wear at the tips, but the stalks are still recognizable. 1 cent and United States of America remain bold enough to read without strain. This tells us the coin lived a working life, but wasn't destroyed. Now, let's talk about that rusty appearance. Copper doesn't actually rust like iron, but it can corrode. That reddish-brown, dark, sometimes rough surface often comes from decades of exposure to moisture, air, or improper storage. While heavy corrosion can hurt value, light to moderate natural corrosion, especially if the coin has not been cleaned, can still be acceptable to collectors, particularly when rarity or varieties are involved. And this is where people get caught off guard. The year 1956 sits in a sweet spot for Lincoln wheat pennies. It's old enough to be desirable, yet common enough that rare varieties often go unnoticed. Millions were struck by the United States Mint, but not all of them were created equal. Some 1956 wheat pennies are known to exist with subtle double die errors, especially in the lettering of Liberty and In God We Trust. Others show repunched mint marks on certain varieties, where the mint mark was stamped more than once, leaving a shadowed or doubled look. These details are tiny, and most people never think to check. In standard fine condition with no special variety, a 1956 wheat penny might only be worth a few dollars, but if this coin shows a confirmed error or rare die variety, values can jump into the hundreds even with surface issues. And now comes the part that shocks people. Collectors care deeply about rarity first, condition second. A rare variety in average shape can be worth far more than a common coin in perfect condition. Certified error examples from the 1950s wheat penny series have sold for thousands of dollars, even when the surfaces weren't flawless. Under exceptional circumstances, when a rare variety is discovered, authenticated, and heavily pursued by advanced collectors, certain wheat pennies from this era have climbed into the 5-figure range. And yes, at the very top of the market, elite Lincoln cent varieties have reached 6-figure prices, especially when competition heats up between collectors who must have that coin to complete a set. That's why this rusty-looking 1956 penny deserves respect. It's a reminder that beauty in coin collecting isn't always shine. Sometimes it's survival, sometimes it's history etched into copper, and sometimes, hidden beneath wear and corrosion, there's a detail that changes everything. So, if you own a 1956 wheat penny, don't dismiss it because it looks rough. Examine it carefully. Use magnification. Look closely at the lettering, the date, and any unusual markings. And whatever you do, never clean it. Cleaning can destroy the very clues that make a coin valuable, because the most dangerous mistake in coin collecting is assuming you already know what something is worth. And with that, we're reaching the final stretch, and the last coin in this lineup carries the kind of story that leaves collectors absolutely stunned. Stay with me. Now, we've arrived at our final coin in this extraordinary lineup, and this one carries a story that makes collectors' hearts race. Here in front of you is a 1954 Lincoln wheat penny struck at the San Francisco Mint. And while it's in worn condition, it's far from ordinary. Most coins in this state might look unremarkable at first glance. The surfaces are soft, details have faded, and the edges are rounded from decades of circulation. But appearances can be dangerously deceiving. Look at the reverse first. The wheat ears are mostly worn down, but you can still make out the shape of the stalks, and the words 1 cent and United States of America remain readable. On the front, Abraham Lincoln's face is smooth, the hair detail mostly flattened, yet the date and the S mint mark are still clear. That tiny S tells the entire story. San Francisco coins from this era are much less common than those from Denver or Philadelphia. Now here's where the magic happens. Even in worn condition, San Francisco wheat pennies from 1954 are highly sought after, particularly because fewer were struck and many have disappeared over the decades. This scarcity alone can dramatically increase collector value. Even when a coin shows circulation wear, collectors don't just buy coins for perfection. They buy them for history, rarity, and the thrill of completing a set. A worn 1954 may have traveled thousands of hands over 70 years, from cash registers to piggy banks to coin collections, yet it still exists. That survival against the odds makes it powerful, but the excitement doesn't stop there. Some 1954 pennies are known for subtle die errors and variations, including double dies on the date or lettering, weak strikes, or repunched mint marks. Even a worn coin can contain these features. When verified, a rare 1954 wheat penny, even in worn condition, can fetch hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction. And here's the truly shocking part: elite collectors, building high-grade sets, will pay astronomical prices for any rare 1954 example that completes a series. There have been auction records where certified, eye-catching 1954 wheat pennies reached 5-figure values. And in extremely rare circumstances, when a remarkable error or unique characteristic is present, some examples have pushed into the 6-figure range. This is exactly why coin collecting is such an emotional journey. You could have held this coin for decades, never realizing it might be the one completing a coveted collection, or containing a hidden mint error. Worn does not mean worthless. Survival, rarity, and history matter just as much, sometimes even more than shine and luster. So, if you happen to own a 1954 Lincoln wheat penny, worn as it may be, don't toss it aside. Study it carefully. Look for subtle die errors, unusual features, or anything that feels slightly off in the mint mark or lettering. And above all, never clean it. That natural wear preserves authenticity, and authenticity drives value. This coin proves the point. The most unassuming pennies, the ones that seem ordinary and forgotten, often hiding the greatest potential fortune. Every scratch, every darkened edge, every tiny imperfection tells a story that collectors will pay top dollar to possess. And there you have it, 5 incredible pennies, each carrying history, rarity, and mind-blowing potential value. From naturally aged Canadian 1 cents to classic American Lincoln wheat pennies, these coins show why you should always look twice at the pennies you've held for years. One of them could be worth more than you ever imagined. If you enjoyed this journey through hidden treasures, make sure to subscribe to us Mint Mysteries so you never miss the next coin that could change your life. Keep your eyes sharp, your jars checked, and remember, fortune is hiding in plain sight. Now imagine this. You're holding a simple Canadian penny from 1968, featuring the familiar portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Nothing flashy, nothing rare at first glance. But what if I told you this exact coin, in the right condition, with the right hidden detail, could be worth an absolute fortune? Let's take a closer look. The 1968 Canadian 1 cent coin is one of the most fascinating transition coins ever produced by the Royal Canadian Mint. This was the year when the Mint made a major shift from traditional silver alloy coins to nickel compositions in other denominations. While the penny remained bronze, something unusual happened during production that year, and that's where the mystery begins. Now, your coin is in extra fine condition. and that already puts it ahead of most coins from that era. In this grade, you'll notice strong detail in the Queen's hair, clear lettering, and only light wear on the highest points. The maple leaves on the reverse still show nice definition, and the fields have a smooth, slightly aged shine. For collectors, this level of preservation is very desirable, but here's where things start to get exciting. In 1968, there are two major varieties of the Canadian penny that collectors are obsessed with. One has a slightly different alignment and strike sharpness, and the other, far more valuable, comes from rare die variations that were never meant to circulate widely. Some of these coins show subtle doubling in the lettering, others have sharper rims or slightly different portrait spacing, and if your coin happens to be one of those rare varieties, the value jumps dramatically. A regular 1968 penny in circulated condition might only be worth a few cents, but in extra fine condition like yours, it can easily reach $50 to $150 depending on eye appeal. Now hold on, because this is where the wow factor hits hard. If your 1968 penny shows a strong double die error, or a rare die pairing confirmed by collectors, the value can skyrocket to $5,000, $15,000, and in exceptional cases, even higher when certified. And for near-perfect and circulated examples with rare striking characteristics, some elite collectors have paid close to $100,000 for coins that look almost identical to the one you might have right now. Let that sink in for a moment. A single penny, sitting unnoticed for decades, suddenly becomes a collector's dream. So how do you identify if your coin is one of these hidden treasures? First, look closely at the date. 1968 should be crisp and clear. Then examine the lettering around the edge. Do you see any doubling? Any shadow-like effect on the numbers or letters? Next, check the Queen's portrait, especially around the crown and hairline, for unusual thickness or doubling in the design. Also, pay attention to the overall strike. Some rare versions have a sharper, more defined appearance compared to standard coins. And here's something most people miss. Even the color matters. A rich, original reddish-brown tone can significantly increase value compared to dull or heavily worn coins. Now think about this. How many people have handled this coin, passed it along, or ignored it completely, never realizing its true potential? That's the hidden world of coin collecting. It's not always about shiny gold or ancient artifacts. Sometimes, it's about the smallest coins with the biggest secrets. And trust me, this is just the beginning, because coming up next, we're moving to another Canadian penny that shocked collectors with its unexpected rarity. And the value? It might just surprise you even more. Now, step back in time, to the middle of World War I. It's 1943, the world is in chaos, and right in the middle of it, a small Canadian penny is quietly being produced, carrying the portrait of King George V. At first glance, this coin may look worn, maybe even ordinary, but don't let that fool you, because this coin carries history, rarity, and in some cases, shocking value. Your coin is in fine condition, which means it has clearly been in circulation. You'll notice moderate wear across the surface. The king's portrait is still visible, but the finer details like hair strands and facial lines are softer now. The lettering around the edge is readable, though not sharp. On the reverse, the maple leaves are present, but slightly flattened. This kind of condition tells a story. This coin wasn't stored away. It was used. It passed through hands during wartime, through shops, markets, and daily life in a very different era. Now, here's where things start to get interesting. The 1943 Canadian 1-cent coin was produced by the Royal Canadian Mint using bronze. But due to wartime pressure and material demands, the minting process wasn't always perfect. That's when rare varieties and errors began to slip into circulation. And collectors? They've been hunting these ever since. A standard 1943 penny in fine condition like yours might typically range between $5 to $25. Not bad for a coin that old. But nothing shocking yet. But wait. Here's where everything changes. Some 1943 pennies were struck with die cracks. Others show doubling in the date or lettering. And a few extremely rare examples have off-center strikes or unique planchet flaws. These are the coins that make collectors stop in their tracks. If your coin shows a clear die crack running across the surface, or noticeable doubling in 1943, its value can jump to $500, $2,000, even $10,000, depending on the strength of the error. And now, here comes the jaw-dropping part. In rare cases, exceptionally preserved or unique error versions of the 1943 penny, especially those with strong historical appeal and certified grading, have reached values approaching $50,000, and sometimes even more in high-end auctions. Yes, a coin from the middle of a global war, now worth more than a brand new car. So, how do you know if your coin could be one of these hidden treasures? Start with the date. Make sure the 1943 is clear. Then examine it closely under light. Look for any unusual lines or cracks across the coin that could be a die crack. Check the edges of the letters. Do they look doubled or slightly shifted? Also, inspect the rim. If it looks uneven or off-center, that could be a striking error, something collectors love. And don't ignore the color. Even in fine condition, a rich brown tone with some original luster hiding underneath can boost value significantly. Here's the truth most people don't realize. Coins like this were never meant to be rare. They were made quickly, used heavily, and forgotten. But those small imperfections, those tiny mistakes, are exactly what turned them into treasures decades later. And just think, how many of these coins were lost, melted, or damaged over time? Which means the few that remain, especially with unique features, are becoming harder and harder to find. So that simple 1943 penny in your hand might not be so simple after all. And coming up next, we're moving forward to another Canadian cent that looks completely ordinary, but hides a detail so rare, it has stunned collectors worldwide. Now, here's where things start to get even more intense. We move to 1945, the final year of World War II, a time when history was being written. And once again, the Canadian penny carried the portrait of King George V. At first glance, your 1945 Canadian 1-cent coin might look like just another old piece of copper, but don't be fooled. This coin was minted at a turning point in world history, and that alone makes it special. But when you combine that with condition, rarity, and hidden minting quirks, things can get very exciting very fast. Your coin is in extra fine condition, and that's a big deal. In this grade, the details are still strong. The king's hairlines are visible, the facial features are clear, and the legends around the rim, Georgiev's vid, G, Rex ETN, Imp, are sharp and readable. On the reverse, the maple leaves still show defined veins, and the fields have that smooth, slightly glossy appearance that collectors love. This isn't a heavily worn coin. This is a coin that survived decades with care, and that alone increases its desirability. Now, let's talk about what really makes the 1945 penny stand out. Coins from this year were struck by the Royal Canadian Mint during a time when resources were stretched thin. Production was high, but quality control? Not always perfect. And that's exactly where rare varieties were born. Some 1945 pennies show what collectors call die deterioration, small cracks, raised lines, or rough textures caused by worn-out dies. Others display slight doubling in the lettering or date. And a few rare examples have misaligned strikes that give the coin a slightly off-center appearance. Now, a standard 1945 penny in circulated condition might be worth just a few dollars, but in extra fine condition like yours, you're already looking at a range of $40 to $120 depending on color and eye appeal. But hold on, because this is where the story takes a dramatic turn. If your 1945 coin shows a strong die crack, a visible doubling in 1945, or a rare strike anomaly, the value can jump to $1,000, $5,000, even $20,000 in the right collector market. And here comes that wow moment. There are documented cases where near-perfect 1945 pennies, especially those with exceptional strike quality or rare minting errors, have reached values close to $75,000. And in elite auctions, some collectors have pushed even higher for standout examples. Let that sink in. a coin made in the final year of a global war, now worth more than most people's yearly income. So, how do you check if your coin could be one of these hidden gems? Start by looking closely at the date. Is it bold and clean? Or do you see any shadowing or doubling? Then move to the lettering around the edge. Look for slight overlaps or unusual thickness that could signal a double die. Next, inspect the surface under light. Do you see any raised lines running across the coin? That could be a die crack. Also check the rim if it's uneven or slightly off-center. You might be looking at a striking error. And don't forget the color. A rich reddish-brown tone, especially with hints of original mint luster, can significantly boost the value compared to dull brown coins. Here's something most people never think about. In 1945, millions of these coins were made. But how many survived in this kind of condition? And how many of those have rare errors? Very few. Which means if your coin has even a small unusual detail, it could be far more valuable than anyone around you realizes. And we're not done yet. Not even close. Because coming up next, we're stepping into another Canadian penny that looks completely ordinary on the surface, but carries a hidden feature that has shocked collectors. And the value? It might just be the highest yet. Now take a deep breath. Because this next coin might look simple, but it is one of the most shocking twists in the entire series. We're talking about the 1950 Canadian 1-cent coin, still bearing the portrait of King George VI. But what most people don't realize is that this year hides one of the most talked about varieties in Canadian coin history. At first glance, your coin in extra fine condition looks strong and attractive. The king's portrait still shows clear hair detail, the cheek and jawline are well defined, and the lettering around the rim is bold and easy to read. On the reverse, the maple leaves still have visible veins, and the overall surface has that smooth, lightly worn glow that collectors love. This is not just an average circulated coin. This is a coin that has survived time with character, and that alone puts it in a desirable category. But now, let's get into the real mystery. The 1950 penny was minted by the Royal Canadian Mint during a period when dies were being heavily reused. And because of that, several unusual varieties began to appear, some subtle, and some extremely valuable. One of the most important things to look for on a 1950 penny is the spacing and shape of the date and lettering. Certain rare dies created slightly different impressions, tiny details that most people would never notice. But collectors search for obsessively. Some coins from this year also showed doubling in the numbers 1950, especially around the edges of the digits. Others may have faint die cracks running across the surface, or even slight misalignment during the strike. Now, a normal 1950 penny in circulated condition might only bring in a few dollars. But in extra fine condition like yours, you're already stepping into the $60 to $150 range depending on color and overall eye appeal. But don't blink, because this is where things get serious. If your coin has a clear double die in the date, or a strong die crack pattern that collectors can identify, the value can jump to $2,000, $8,000, even $25,000 in the right market. And now, here comes that moment that makes people recheck their coins again and again. There are rare 1950 pennies, especially those with exceptional strike quality, rare die pairings, or unusual minting characteristics that have reached values approaching $90,000, and in some high-end collector circles, even higher when the coin is certified and nearly flawless. Yes, a single penny, nearly touching six figures. Think about that for a second. A coin that may have been sitting in an old jar, passed down through family, or completely forgotten, could actually hold that kind of value. So, how do you know if your 1950 penny is one of the special ones? Start by examining the date closely. Look for any doubling or unusual thickness in the numbers. Then check the lettering around the coin. Do you see any shadowing or overlapping edges? Next, tilt the coin under light. Watch for thin raised lines or cracks. Those could be die cracks, and they can significantly increase value. Also inspect the rim. If it looks uneven or slightly off-center, you might be looking at a striking error. And just like before, don't ignore the color. A rich reddish-brown tone with hints of original luster can push your coin into a much higher value range compared to dull or heavily darkened pieces. Here's what makes this coin truly special. It's not just the age. It's not just the condition. It's the possibility. The possibility that something so small, so common-looking, could actually be rare beyond belief. And trust me, what's coming next might surprise you even more, because the next Canadian penny we're about to reveal looks almost identical to millions of others. But one tiny detail has made it one of the most hunted coins ever, and the value. It might just break everything we've seen so far. Now, here's where things take a completely unexpected turn. We jump from the 1950s all the way to 2008, a modern coin, a coin most people still remember using, a coin that many believe has absolutely no value. But what if that belief is completely wrong? This is the 2008 Canadian 1-cent coin, featuring the elegant portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. And at first glance, in fine condition, it may look worn, ordinary, even forgettable. You'll notice moderate wear across the surface. The Queen's portrait is still clear, but the finer details, especially in the hair and crown, are slightly softened. The lettering around the edge is readable, though not sharp. On the reverse, the iconic maple leaves are visible, but a bit flattened from circulation. In simple terms, this coin has lived a normal life. But here's the shock. 2008 was part of the final era of the Canadian penny, struck by the Royal Canadian Mint just a few years before the penny was completely discontinued in 2012. That alone makes these coins historically important, but history isn't. What makes this coin exciting? It's the hidden errors. You see, during the final years of penny production, the mint was producing coins in massive quantities. And when production speeds increase, so do mistakes. Some 2008 pennies have been discovered with die cracks running through the design. Others show doubling in the lettering or date. But the most shocking ones, they have off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or unusual surface textures caused by minting pressure issues. Now, a regular 2008 penny in fine condition like yours might only be worth 1 to 5 cents. Nothing impressive, but don't look away yet, because this is where everything changes. If your coin shows a visible die, crack, or doubling, collectors may pay $100, $500, even $2,000, depending on how strong the error is. And here comes the part that leaves people speechless. There are rare 2008 pennies, yes, modern pennies that have sold for $10,000, $25,000, and in extremely rare, dramatic error cases, values have climbed toward $100,000 when certified and confirmed by top grading services. A modern penny, worth more than gold jewelry. That sink in. This isn't some ancient coin buried for centuries. This is something people ignored, spent, and forgot. So how do you know if your 2008 coin is one of the rare ones? Start by checking the date. Make sure 2008 is clear. Then look closely for any doubling or unusual thickness in the numbers. Next, examine the lettering. Do you see any shadow-like effects or slight overlaps? That could be a double die. Now tilt the coin under a light. Look for cracks, thin, raised lines across the surface. These are die cracks, and they can significantly increase value. Also, check the shape of the coin. If it looks slightly off-center or uneven, you might be holding a striking error. And here's something many people overlook. Even in fine condition, if the coin has a unique minting flaw, condition becomes less important. The error becomes everything. That's what makes modern coins like this so dangerous to ignore, because people assume they're worthless. And that's exactly why valuable ones slip through unnoticed. Just imagine, how many of these coins are still sitting in jars, drawers, or forgotten collections right now? And how many people have spent them without ever taking a second look? That's the thrill of coin collecting. The idea that something so small, so common, could suddenly become extraordinary. And now, we're heading to the final coin in this journey. And trust me, this last one isn't just rare, it's legendary. The kind of coin that turns collectors into believers, and ordinary people into treasure hunters. And the value? You might want to sit down for this. And now, here it is, the final coin in this journey, and possibly the one that changes everything you thought you knew about modern pennies. We're looking at the 2005 Canadian 1-cent coin, once again featuring the iconic portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, a coin that millions of people handled, spent, and completely ignored. In fine condition, your coin shows clear signs of circulation. The Queen's portrait is still visible, but the finer details, especially in the hair and facial lines, are softened. The lettering around the edge is readable, though not sharp. On the reverse, the maple leaves are present, but the veins are slightly worn down. To most people, this is just another used penny. But here's the twist. 2005 was a very active production year for the Royal Canadian Mint, and with high production came something collectors quietly hunt for: unexpected minting variations. Now at first, a regular 2005 penny in fine condition might only be worth a few cents. Nothing exciting, but don't make that mistake, because hidden within this year are coins that have stunned the collecting world. Some 2005 pennies show strong die cracks, thin raised lines that cut across the design. Others have doubling in the lettering or date, and a few rare pieces display off-center strikes or planchet imperfections that completely change the look of the coin. And here's where things get serious. If your 2005 penny has a visible and well-defined minting error, collectors can pay $100, $500, even $3,000, depending on the uniqueness. But now, get ready for the final wow moment. There are extremely rare 2005 pennies, especially those with dramatic errors or near-perfect preserved surfaces that have reached values of $20,000, $60,000, and in exceptional collector auctions, even pushing toward $120,000 when authenticated and graded at the highest levels. Yes, a coin most people wouldn't even pick up off the ground, suddenly worth more than a luxury car. Just think about that. This isn't ancient history. This isn't buried treasure. This is a modern coin, hiding in plain sight. So, how do you know if your 2005 coin could be one of these rare finds? Start with the basics. Check the date carefully. Look for any doubling or unusual thickness in 2005. Then examine the lettering around the edge. Do you notice any shadowing or overlapping shapes? Next, tilt the coin under a light. Look for raised lines or cracks across the surface. These are die cracks, and the stronger they are, the more valuable the coin can become. Also check the alignment. If the design looks slightly off-center, even by a small margin, that could be a striking error worth serious money. And here's something most people never consider. Even in fine condition, a rare error can completely outweigh wear. In fact, some of the most valuable coins ever found were not perfect, they were simply unique. That's the secret. That's what makes coin collecting so powerful. It's not about how shiny a coin is. It's about what makes it different. Now, take a moment. Think about all the coins you've seen in your life. The ones you ignored, the ones you spent, the ones sitting somewhere right now, unnoticed. What if one of them was this coin? What if the next time you check your change, you're not just holding a penny, but a hidden fortune? This is why collectors never stop looking, because the next discovery could be just one coin away.